Aggrieved crowds on the streets have become a familiar sight in parts of the Middle East. But these protesters in Kuwait didn't want to overthrow a regime. Instead, they demanded citizenship in the country they call home and the rights and privileges that go with it. Only a small number of the country's 120,000 Bedoon came to the protests earlier this year. But there have been no more since, seemingly put off by the police clampdown and subsequent arrests. And this is where some of those protests took place. It's one of Kuwait's poorest districts, but just a few kilometres away from the skyscrapers being built on the country's oil wealth. But the Bedoon people aren't sharing in that, and so do they really see any prospect of their future improving? Lafi lives here with his wife, mother and 4 children. While born in Kuwait, he's not recognised as Kuwaiti because his parents didn't register with the government after the country's independence in 1961. That makes it near impossible to get official papers, from birth and marriage certificates to a driving licence and identity card. And because the Bedoon don't qualify for government jobs, Lafi says he can only find irregular, poorly paid work.
I sometimes don't have enough money to buy the kids' milk. It costs about $7.50 a bottle, and I have to borrow the money. So when I say that we live below the poverty line, I'm not exaggerating. And we now know that our kids' future is lost. Their future is unknown. It's a dark future. We know that after high school, no university will accept them, and there is no job for them.
Kuwait classes the majority of Bedoon as illegal residents who've deliberately destroyed evidence of their true nationality to try and get the rights enjoyed by citizens such as free healthcare and access to higher education. Bedoon groups insist this is true for only very few, adding many have even fought in Kuwait's army. Demands for citizenship seem no closer to being addressed, but the protests have focused minds.
Lately we just had Human Rights Watch launching their report. There was a great deal of frankness. The Bedoon were there who also talked and spoke, and we had also representatives of the government, and there was cross exchanges were very frank and very tough, very powerful. It was all in the open, and this is something new.
But the Bedoon remain among Kuwait's poorest, and their economic plight is something experts say could be easily tackled for the good of both them and the country.
If the situation for the Bedoon improves, so you have full employment opportunities with opening doors, whether in the public sector or in the private sector. Here you are talking about 50, 60,000 people, employable people.
With job opportunities limited, many Bedoon work illegally, selling fruit on the street, keen to keep a low profile. Unemployment was one trigger for the Arab Spring in places like Tunisia and Egypt, and Bedoon groups say that while their cause is very different, protests here were inspired by the uprisings elsewhere.
It's a ticking time bomb. The bomb hasn't burst yet, and these are only sparks before the big explosion. There are 120,000 Kuwaiti Bedoon, and this time only 1,000 or 2,000 went out to the streets. The events in the Middle East inspired the young Bedoon to go out and ask for their rights, the rights that were taken away from them.
Among families like Lafi's, there is hope that their children will get some of those rights. But there's also a sense of resignation that the fight for citizenship is one that will take generations to resolve.